Welcome. I am Clare Moody, your Police and Crime Commissioner for Avon and Somerset. Every month, I host a live broadcast where I hold the Chief Constable to account for the performance of Avon and Somerset Police and ensure transparency for the public in the work of Avon and Somerset Police. So now, let me introduce Chief Constable Sarah Crew.
Hi there, Claire.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for joining me today. This month is slightly different because we are basing all the questions on the Peel report that has just been released. Peel stands for Police Efficiency, Effectiveness and Legitimacy. It's the primary process by which the Inspectorate of Police are able to assess the performance of each police service in England and Wales, and it happens every few years. These reports provide graded judgments on how well each police service is doing, and they really are useful for me in terms of the governance and scrutiny of Avon and Somerset Police. So, firstly, can you please, Sarah, talk us through the grades that were received in this latest Peel report?
Okay, so it helps to give a bit of context. There are 8 policing capabilities that make up that police efficiency, effectiveness, legitimacy definition, and you can achieve one of 5 grades ranging from outstanding, good, adequate, requires improvement and inadequate. In public treatment, one of those capabilities we've been rated as good, which I think indicates fair and respectful treatment of the public, and an appropriate use of police powers. Another capability is preventing and deterring crime and antisocial behaviour, and we've been rated as good there, again showing a strong focus on crime prevention and I think community engagement. A third area is building, supporting and protecting the workforce. Now we've been rated as adequate there, and that reflects I think the investments we've made in our workforce development and our wellbeing measures, but more to do. With response times and handling public calls effectively. Fifth area, investigating crime, that also requires improvement, with concerns there raised over investigation quality and specifically supervisory oversight of crime investigations. Sixth area, nearly there, protecting vulnerable people, rated as requires improvement. Now that's highlighting the need for better identification, I think, and protection of people that are identified as vulnerable people. Seventh, managing offenders and suspects, rated as and supervision. And lastly, leadership and force management, rated as requires improvement. And here the Inspectorate were signalling the need for improvements in our management structure, in how we utilise data to support performance improvement, and also internal communication between leadership and officers and staff on the ground.
So, did any of those gradings shock you, worry you?
A process of inspection actually isn't just inspectors arriving. So we are very aware of the areas that we need to improve in. They weren't a shock to us. In many of them we've seen improvement. There's still more to do.
Thank you, Sarah. Before I go sort of deep diving into a couple of the areas that were highlighted in the report, I do want to pick up, you mentioned the areas of good that were in the report, and one of those was highlighted as innovation. And you talked about antisocial behaviour. There was a recognition of the work that's done with, Avon and Somerset Police, and it particularly referenced going out in Bath. And that opportunity when police officers go out, if there is also a sort of expert in the car as well, a specialist youth worker in the car that can engage with young people at that crucial moment, it can implement it can bring about change.
Absolutely agree. I think that talks to the strength of neighbourhood policing, but I think it also talks to the strength of partnerships in the prevention space, and I know that's obviously key to one of your priorities as well, and something we would love to do more of.
Yeah, and it does. And the second one I wanted to highlight as well, which, as you said, prevention being a key part of the plan. Another part of the plan is neighbourhood policing, and the fact that Avon and Somerset are piloting the neighbourhood policing training as well. So, that will be coming through.
I mean, neighbourhood policing for us, despite issues around finances and resources, is something we're committed to. Because it works, quite simply. So, yes, absolutely. And it's great to see that appreciated and valued.
It's brilliant. But, as you've talked through, there are areas where improvements have to be made that came out of the Peel inspection. So, how are you going to use the report to improve the service to the public as well?
Well, the process of inspection and the inspection report itself, it's a vital tool to improve it. You know, that's what it's about. It is a grade card, if you like, but it's a mechanism to improve performance for the public. We take it really seriously, and we have a really structured approach. It's vital intelligence, if you like, of where we need to focus our attention in the limited resources that we do have. So to give a sense of that, each of our areas for improvement have chief officer ownership and oversight, and each one has a senior accountable, responsible senior leader who is both responsible for delivering on the improvement, but also empowered to work across the organisation to do so, and they have that support of the chief officer. All of these areas where we need to improve are embedded into our performance framework. So that means they are regularly scheduled for focus, for deep dives, for discussion and scrutiny and oversight. And we do that through our Constabulary Management Board, which is at the highest level of governance in the Constabulary, and I know we report into you through that forum, but also in the committees that feed into it. So it's not just something we pick up next time the inspectorates come. It's a focus continually. There is, by looking at all of those reports across the country, the opportunity also to look at what's happening elsewhere, where other people are doing well, and to identify good practice and bring it and adapt it for Avon and Somerset. And also to look at ideas and innovations that are happening elsewhere. Now, the inspectorates do that, but the college help us as well. There are a couple of areas where we've already been able to pick up good practice in other places, and I'm thinking of our enhanced video response here from colleagues in Dorset and the college, and to start to bring improvements in Avon and Somerset. And that's seen one of our areas to require improve, responding to the public, put us back straight into the top 10 for answering emergency calls, for reducing abandoned calls on our 101 line. So we're well within the top echelons already as a response of that. And that's come from looking around at other experiences and trying to embed that good practice. So that's another way. I think the important thing is being proactive about these things. We take this really, really seriously. We are proactive. We recognise the impact it has on trust and confidence. And we are very determined to tackle those areas for improvement. And I know we'll be talking more about those later in the session. But the last thing to say, we do invite scrutiny. I mean, this is a process of scrutiny. And within the scrutiny that you give us in a more detailed way, this is how we work together to make policing stronger.
And it's that point around picking up examples of elsewhere, of good practice elsewhere, that is an important element of being a learning organisation.
Yes, absolutely.
That you're open to that innovation, and indeed, it's part of the continuing conversations that you and I have about new ways of delivering that service to people in Avon and Somerset. Now into that kind of more detailed areas, there are two specific, what are called areas for improvement, that I'd like to interrogate a bit more, AFIs as they're referred to. Both of these relate to sexual offending, and again this falls under the plan as well, and an important area I know for the work that you are doing. So the first AFI I want to highlight is this, and I'll quote directly, reading the quote: "The constabulary should ensure that its Internet Child Abuse Team, known as ICAT, is able to manage images of online child abuse in line with nationally recognised risk assessment timescales, and that supervisors regularly review officer caseloads." So when we think of different types of crime, it really doesn't get much more serious than the sexual abuse of children. So obviously this is a concerning AFI, and can you talk through how the service has got to this AFI and how you intend to address it?
Okay, so what we're talking about here, as you say, it's a really serious issue. So this is people, mainly men, this is using the internet to upload or download images of children being sexually abused. Now, with this, it's a serious offence, but we also worry that contact offences may be happening as well. We also worry about this as it may be a sign of an escalation in behaviour and risk. And we have seen a growing volume of these types of cases. Our focus in them is to first safeguard children. Those are real children in those images, but there may be other children at risk. Second, bring offenders to justice. And third, generally drive public protection more generally. Now, we've seen huge volume changes in this over the years. Over the last 10 years, that's 500%. Now, what does that mean in real terms? We see that most of these cases come as referrals from the National Crime Agency to us. We see hundreds of referrals each year. At the moment, our run rate over the last 6 months has been 73 cases a month. Now,
when you say run rate, what does that mean?
It's constantly changing. So for an example, the National Crime Agency have signalled to this, we expect a 100% increase in volume over the next 12 months. So they don't all come at once, so they might come in peaks and troughs, which creates challenges for us. But the average is 73 per month at the moment. That will probably be 140 per month this time next year, and we expect that to increase. Now that, but it's not just about volume. These are, as our digital world has become more complex, how we respond to these are more complex. It requires real specialism. Examples of what's involved would be, first we need to identify who the individual who downloaded this is. So there's quite some work to identify who they are, where they are. Then when we seek to arrest them, we have to be very careful of how we do that, because we don't want to lose evidence. That might be on a mobile phone in their hand. We then need to take all those devices and explore what's in there. And if there are images, real people, humans, need to view those, which is traumatic in itself, and we have to be careful of, to categorise the seriousness of them. So there is an awful lot of work that's involved in pulling those investigations together and those files to make sure we get positive charging decisions and these cases are brought to justice, as well as at every stage of that process identifying any risk that may be playing to any child. So in terms of what are we doing about that, as volumes have increased, we've struggled to meet the timelines required. Cases are graded as very high, high, medium, etc., etc. Obviously our focus is on the very high and high, and that means backlogs arise in the ones that aren't very high and high. It's a case of resource in demand. So what we've been doing is we've had to redeploy staff from other areas of policing, train those staff to be able to do this very specialist role. so that we can cope with the growth in demand. We've also put on top a special operation involving some of our other wider teams, so that we bring as much resource as we possibly can to different parts of the process. It might be arresting, disrupting, searching, so that we can be as effective and efficient as possible. So over the last 28 days, we've resolved 140 referrals. That's halved our backlogs. And we will keep those extra resources in place. I think we're going to continue to need to grow in this area, frankly. But with the special operation of other resources in place until we're back within the timelines required. As I say, we're expecting this to grow and grow and grow, and we do have a finite resource level of police officers and police staff. So without going into the detail of where those resources are coming, it does involve difficult decisions, and other bits of our policing business will be affected by needing to do this. But I think the public would expect us, as you say, these are really serious cases with high risk. It's just what we're doing may not be that visible to the public, expecting to see uniform officers walking around our streets and villages.
And that is a really important point and a real challenge for policing, because you and I will both, when we're out and about, we know the public want to see visible policing, and if officers are doing this very, very necessary work, then except when they are able to be intercepting with perpetrators, and even then, they're not visible doing this work. So it's a constant challenge around that presence point, but the response to this area. So coming to another area as well is the AFI on sex offender management and the need for the constabulary. So, and again, I'm going to quote from the inspection report here. The constabulary should ensure that it has processes and resources in place to visit and manage the risk posed by registered sex offenders. The report references some significant backlogs in conducting visits and risk assessments. Again, for obvious reasons, this is of public concern. So can you explain where these backlogs are now following that report?
Okay. Yeah, we are currently managing just under 1,700 registered sex offenders in our communities, and the standards we use, something called authorised protected professional practice, requires that 2 trained offender managers conduct visits where they risk assess the likelihood or potential for reoffending of those registered sex offenders. Now, the frequency of visit depends on the risk that they are assessed at. So somebody who's a high risk will have very regular visits, some of them, and increasingly, unannounced. Sometimes that's an inefficient way of doing things, in the sense of people are often not there. But it's also a necessary way of doing things, because that's how you're going to best identify whether there's a risk there. The number of RSOs has increased, much like those other referrals we've just talked about, by 3% yearly over the last 10 years. Now, we've talked here previously about our success in sexual offences, rape, etc.
Yeah.
When people are convicted at the other end of the criminal justice process, they will become registered sex offenders for us to manage. So we are generating some of that growth, and that will continue. In January 2024, our backlog was 283 out of 1,521 registered sex offenders. Now it's 185, so it's reduced, out of a much bigger number of 1,600 registered sex offenders. So I think we've got solid progress there. When we look at our very highest offenders, we have a backlog that's less than 10 now, and it's coming down every day. So we are making progress, but it's against a tide of rising demand.
And this is like, as we were talking about with the internet child abuse crimes, that you are having to put special, additional resource in to respond to this. And it's how that decision-making process, the accountability for that as well, how that's maintained over the longer term.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that we're having conversations with the public about this. I mean, the public might not realise, for instance, that the police do this. This is not necessarily, it might be detecting crime or assessing risk post a conviction, but it's not maybe what the public think the police do. We investigate crime, we're visible in communities. This is a very unseen part of our work, necessarily because of the risks posed by some of these individuals, and the necessity of keeping, maintaining discretion and confidentiality around this means that this isn't done by uniform officers that public see. This is done very much in a low-key way. People won't be aware of it, but actually it's a very big part of our business and a growing part of our business.
And so this sort of ties into that point about how you're going to keep this going, and how you can make it sustainable. And so, yes, how do you keep the resource level in this area?
I mean, this is a very resource intensive. This involves under the current practice, 2 offender managers. Those are human beings. Yep. There's not a technology solution to conclusively solve this without a change in that authorised professional practice. So we have to continue putting more resources into this area. So much like the internet child abuse, we're having to make decisions about removing people from other policing business, moving them into this area, training them in this area, and as the volume increases, increasing that number. Again, we are bringing, to help us, though it's less effective in this area, other resources temporarily to surge when we need to. So people that are working elsewhere, they have the training, they can come and help at periods where we need to get on top of backlogs. But yes, this is really about human beings. We are using technology where we can. I would like to see more use of it to detect and manage risk. In the past, we've been quite innovative and we found it to be effective. However, that is outside of authorised effective practice. And that's something that in previous inspections has been recognised, but in this inspection has been said, we just need to go back to the current practice. That's not a criticism, it's as it is, but going forward, I think technology could help us.
In what ways? What sort of technology do you think would work?
Well, I think offenders will be using technology. They'll be using their phones, they'll be using laptops, they'll be using social media, etc. Much of that doesn't require a visit. It can be monitored. In conjunction with them, in confidentiality and consent and all of those things. But I think we could look at people's digital footprint and use that to inform our risk assessments and where they may crop up in were they stopped in a car, who were they with, from the other information that's available to us to help inform our risk assessments that could complement significantly a visit of 2 human beings and having a conversation with a person and using that training to detect whether they think there's a risk. So I think there's augmentation that could happen and innovation. These standards were originally put in place 10, 20 years ago, and our whole world of digital footprint has changed significantly since there. Where there are breaches, though, of registered sex offender registration, any other orders that are, or restrictions on that particular registered sex offender, we are utilising our wider resources to be able to make arrests and put people before court. So that frees up our offender managers to focus on the visits and the risk assessments. And we're increasing training as well of our, not just the new people, but the constant continuous professional development, picking up some of that best practice so we're as efficient and effective as we can be at this. But the answer here, as there, is we are having to put more resources into this area. Again, an unseen area to the public.
And on both of these, but I think particularly on the ICAT work, what are you doing about the welfare of officers in this work? I mean, you said, this is exposing them to things none of us would choose to, or most of us would choose never to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think to these particular areas of work, particularly ICAT, one, you can't, as much as I say we would deploy people into these areas, people can't be forced into these areas. They have to want to. Two, we then need to put in place really good supervision, and I mean that line management supervision, but I also mean clinical supervision, mandatory referrals for counselling, occupational health, to keep an eye on these people. We shouldn't keep them there for too long either, so there has to be breaks from this as well. So we're very alive to the risks that here. Another area for technology that I would like to explore is how much can artificial intelligence do to help us categorise. Now, it would require a human to go in and check and dip sample after, but the constant reviewing of images for hours on end, which is very hard on the human, I think technology could help us there as well significantly to reduce the impact on people. And, risk identified within the wider inspection, and I think it was rated as adequate, was our wellbeing provision is good and improving. We've made investments there. We continually need to achieve that. We have a strategic aspiration to be a trauma-informed police force. We're quite, that will always be a journey, but I think we're quite advanced on that journey, at least at understanding some of the impacts on trauma on our people, but also on our communities. And this is an area which intersects with the two.
Thank you, Sarah. It's an area that I know will continue to be a part of our conversations, a part of the governance and scrutiny process as well. Both the Peel inspections more broadly, but these areas in particular, because, as you said, the impact on our children, where they are directly affected, and on our communities is really significant.
Yep.
Thank you. So, thank you at home for joining us today. Ordinarily, we frame these PQTs around questions that are submitted from the public, but for obvious reasons that didn't happen this month. But we will be returning to that next month. And so I would ask you again if there are any questions that you as the public want to submit for the focus of PQT in future months. Please join us for the next one, which will be on the 25th of March, and details of that will be shared on the website and on social media in coming weeks. You can also provide feedback through my website, which is Avon and Somerset PCC. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope to see you in March.